Yo, Morrowind rocks. Here's my top 3. Uh-oh. This one's a meteor. That's just a different word for space rock. Do your characters ever look like this? Mine do. But beneath my exquisite robe, heavy armor, sexy shirt, and smooth green skin lies the heart of a monster. Not flesh. Hey kids, lying is bad. Don't act like you don't know what I'm talking about. If you've beaten Morrowind, you've slain gods, murdered tens of people, killed hundreds of creatures, and stolen thousands. That's 4 magnitudes of f***ed up.
Great job.
The game's just too easy to break, so I decided to make a virtuous Morrowind run.
A Morrowind poem. No platter, no cheese. Sneak is broken and for thieves. No burglary or other crimes, nor alchemy of any kind. Break no law, is what I say. For if I do, I'll have to pay. To confess the true need for this run.
Morrowind is no longer fun.
You fool! Fetcher!
We're done here.
I want nothing to do with
For me.
Yes, confused? We're all waiting.
Alright, fetchers, let's get into it. I gotta tell you a few things plainly first. I cleared out all my saves and all the nonsense that I used to make that intro. This is a bit of a role-playing experience and a challenge run, so it was kind of tough to balance the footage. I didn't want to skip large amounts of progress. I was trying to demonstrate that everything was being done on the level. It starts off pretty granular so you can get in my character's head, then I start to pick up the pace. I'm constantly switching between first and third person, mainly because it was funny to me. Also, I was recording audio the whole time, so it's a mix of my live reactions and post-commentary. At first I was going to list every rule, but that would make for a really boring video, so anything I didn't cover will just be explained along the way. If you want to skip character creation, you can go here. Otherwise, no stupid roleplays complete without an equally stupid backstory. Now, you've probably heard of many outlanders who've come to Vardenfell. Pepsi Can Jackson's story is one all his own. You see, Pepsi Can's his prison name that just sort of stuck. Parents called him, Percy. Traditional Breton name. Till one day they didn't call him anything at all. Not because they died or anything, they were just some real dick parents. But then, they died. He found himself on the streets in need of some coin. Fell in with that weird gang of cats. Unfortunately, Percy didn't have any wares, so we all know what he had to sell. Before too long, it got rounded up, solicitation, by a non-beast race. Those guards don't care too much when they're filling out the forms. You say Percy, they hear Pepsi, they write down Pepsi. No amount of protest is gonna fix that. The best way to get a nickname that you hate to stick is to tell everyone how much you hate it. It was in prison that, developed his notorious reputation for passive-aggressive tactics to get anything he needed. So if you needed something in prison, who could get it? Pepsi Can. Hence the name. Hope you'll join me today as Pepsi Can tries to turn over a new leaf and live life on the straight and narrow. I knew I was going to be dependent on magic for this playthrough. I took endurance because I needed more starting health, and strength is worthless to me. Luck just seemed like the Chad decision to make. Not planning to fight anyone, thus I took no weapon or armor skills. If I have to, though, I'll beat you down with my fists. I took no skills related to stealth or stealing. I decided acrobatics and athletics made it too easy to level up, so I padded out my skill sheet with things like speechcraft and mercantile.
Very good.
I almost always choose the lady for 50 stat points. In this run, I figured it was the most balanced to get some extra magicka and cancel out my racial bonus. Pepsi can's all set. Here's our starting stats. Okay, I'm sick of these feds. Let's get out of here. They want me to take that stuff, but I have no interest in it. I'll read this note, though. He wants his dagger. Oh no, I took it. No. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. There we go. Oh, the knife is still in it, too. Wonderful. Okay, good. Nobody will know. Oh no, that's the release identity. Oh gosh. This is going tragically wrong. We're off to a terrible start. That's bad. Okay. Alright. They're gonna make me take that ring. I knew it. Look at this shit. None of this stuff is mine. I won't be checking out the trade house. I have nothing to sell. Oh my gosh, there he is. Quick, here. Just put that on the ground and let's get out of here. Speaking to that man is a crime, and it will not be tolerated in my run. Jackson had no reason to hang around this town, and it was full of deadbeats. Criminal scum like himself. He knew he didn't have the money to throw away on something like fast travel. It was a convincing offer, and she certainly had the virtues he was looking for. But he had to move on. He was hoofing it. But a creature obstructed the path. In his heart, he held no desire to slay this vile Quama vermin. Did all he could. Flee. The creature hopped with a fervor he found hard to believe. How could this tiny worm keep up with a grown man running as fast as he could for his life? And this, oh, I'm out of fatigue. This is bad. Guards, I need you. Help. Luckily, Pepsi Can had been trained to keep his cool in times like these. He'd seen worse things happen in prison, and he knew when the guards were coming to take care of business. Thank you, good sir. He got back on the road, but out of nowhere, a moral quandary had fallen right in front of it. He looked upon the man. Sadness. He looked at his giant journal and wondered why a man needed to book so big. Curious of his final moments, he peered at the notes. Saw his scrolls. To not take these would be to abandon this man's research. He was clearly a scholar and explorer, pushing the limitations of magicka. The last thing he would want is for his work to die here with him. I took him, and I won't be selling them to a shop. I'll be putting them to good use later on. As for his other belongings, clearly he couldn't rob this man. Taking the clothes off this dead man's back would be the same as robbing a tomb. A sword, clearly bequeathed to him by family, and to take a man's Colovian fur hat, one would not like to think of themselves as the type of person who takes another's Colovian fur hat. I gazed enviously upon his robe. I knew that to take it would leave the man nude.
Unacceptable.
Came up with a compromise. I decided I would carry on this man's studies in his likeness. I had to look the part after all. With Tarheel's decency still intact, I left the man and his other possessions alone. Such a vague term. For all I knew, dispose of corpse meant my character was going to have a snack. He carried on to Balmora, and another rodent pursued. Nearby people were of no assistance. He couldn't bring himself to slay the innocent beast. It was only following its instincts. I figured it wouldn't be until I found my way into town that I would receive any help. I used my class specialization and cried for the guards. Needless to say, an outlander's needs aren't looked upon as high priority. With the devil rat finally slain, I looked upon its corpse. It held nothing of value. This depressed me. Not that I longed for its valuables. I would never take them, but that this rat had nothing of value in its life. I looked around the town of Balmora. It was my duty to dispose of this corpse. Again, not knowing what that is, I'm going to eat this rat. I knew my only quick way to make a buck around here was to actually report right to duty. he let himself in. He was disgusted to find that his superior lived in such a ramshackle dump. After laying eyes upon the man, he was more than forthcoming, letting Caius see his package.
Let's hear it.
Jackson's a bit more savvy than some of the other outlanders that rolled into town. Didn't take him long to cotton on to the whole skooma thing being a part of a grand ruse, part of his genius cover. I considered his recommendation. With one guild entirely dedicated to fighting and the other one to thieving, there was no choice but to enlist in the Mages Guild. Ha! Never strike or steal from another guild member. Do you know who you're speaking to, ma'am? Yes, I would like... Actually, I'm kind of turned off of joining, based on the fact that you had to clarify that. He wasn't sure if he was going to fit in, but he required access to their spells. In the back of his mind lurked this sneaking suspicion that a power higher than the Tribunal, Daedra, Divines, any of them, was out to get him. Like the true creator of this world, f***ed up the interaction with the expansion. This was all a simple hunch, though. The only way to put it off was through cheating. This was unacceptable. He would have to find a way to pacify or defeat this would-be attacker. Two spells in particular seemed very appealing. Unfortunately, he lacked the requisite gold. He looked into the Mages Guild supply chest, crunched the numbers. Downstairs were 5 people, upstairs 2 more. In the supply chest, 10 potions. This left only 1 to go around fairly. He took the fair amount. Knowing the others remain here, he felt no guilt taking the Scrolls of Intervention. He'd found his first worthy purchase. Looking back on my first segment, this has been the most important purchase of the game, by far. Honestly, I know how important fatigue is to the success of almost everything in the game. It won't be an option this time, but I just usually use that enchantment slot for something better and just chug potions. They'd got him sent to prison, but he was willing to look past that. Pepsi Can was a new man, and whatever you need, Pepsi can get it. What is it you need, Ajira? I had a history of getting into jams. Figured Potion of Levitation could help me out of a sticky situation. I bought that too. Headed south towards the Odai River. But when he looked outside, he saw it was night. It was best to spend it indoors. No man of virtue waits in the streets or sleeps out in the woods. He found his way to a proper bed. Unfortunately.
How interesting. A tourist.
Excuse me, I'm a member here, ma'am. Your eyes are creepy. I'm sorry, that was rude. May I get through? After resting, he set out the next morning. En route, he passed a woman. Disarmed by her casual greeting,
Yes, friend.
chose to speak with this lady, but saw this catfish coming a mile away. He realized it was a trick to tell him about the plight of her son. Regrettably, he was ill-equipped for this now, but resolved to do it later. As I left, I felt sympathy that the woman needed to resort to such tactics to get her son rescued. I dutifully collected exactly 1 of each mushroom. PCJ does not rob nature. However, this was for important alchemical research, or so he was told. But on his way back, terror lurked around the corner. Did you catch that? Let's watch again.
Slow motion.
Dear Lord. I bound my body in a magic barrier, blessed my soul with divine sanctuary. It was clear this would not be enough. I looked for solace in the written word, as I thought this was my final moments. Then the revelation dawned on me that I could escape. Though down a scroll, this took me exactly where I needed to go. Shortly after, I had my suspicions confirmed. I required rest after the trek through the swamp, yet none would be had. Ambushed by an assassin, the scuffle ignored by my guildmates. This was my first experience with death. I should probably note now that there is no saving and reloading, except upon death. If something goes wrong, I roll with the punches, every time. Reloading the save, Pepsi Can prepared himself for another possible pummeling. I returned the fungus to the feline. I used some of the reward I received to fortify myself, placed some important personal affects nearby to provide spiritual protection. Fortunately, I was undisturbed while I slept. Yet, this next day would prove very disturbing. From the way Ajiri even phrased her proposal, I knew I had made friends with a monster. I immediately left the conversation. I felt complicit in what could be the collection of dubious mushrooms, as I suspected her purpose with them. Not wanting to even associate with gamblers, I looked for work elsewhere. I had heard of Aldrune. Some other prisoners shipped in back in the day. Said it was a dusty hellstorm. Just my type of place. I headed right over. Edwina's requests were simple. Retrieve a book, get her potion. This hardly seemed like mage work, but he was happy to not have to fight. As for the first task, given her impatient demeanor, I looked around the Mages Guild in case she neglected to look there herself. This turned out to be practically true when the local bookseller had information. This brings me to another nuance of my run, though. I must read every book I pick up. This is to prevent book abuse, for free skill points. It was disheartening to see such cowardly spells on offer from my own guildmates. Instead, I chose a proactive defense to stop my pursuers in their path, and it was 1/3 the price. He followed his lead to Vivek and the rare bookstore. The thrifty cat merchant took advantage of him in his unrested state. He failed to recall that fatigue played a factor in purchases. He grabbed a few other things on the way out. As for her potion, I grabbed it in 30 seconds and went back. I unsuccessfully admired her delegation of authority. I knew I had gained her trust. Unfortunately, this was made evident by the fact that she asked me to do some ethically questionable behavior. I knew what she was implying. He had a feeling she hadn't even read the first book he got her. These were more of status symbols rather than important literature. I wanted to help her. She was clearly jealous of her friend, but I refused to steal the book. I would find it another way. In the meantime, went to Wolverine Hall. No introvert bookworms would be hanging out in a room this tiny with this many people.
Master was right.
Hello.
Discipline
I
us.
hope you won't take too much of my time.
Require of me.
Just like I thought, Skink was a true bro. First thing he did was set me up on a date. He must have heard I'd been in prison for a while. Jackson's only option was to heal his charge if she was in danger. He hoped she was bringing the firepower. He crafted a heal on touch spell. Her safety worried him, as did the fact he may have to touch her without her explicit consent. Let me tell you something really quick. I tried this once before. I instantly broke the game by making a spell called Don Juan that fortified personality from 0 to 80 for 1 second. I could cast it over and over, even at level 1, until I had a perfect interaction with everyone. There won't be any ranges on spells I create, and I won't use any exploits like that. He found himself struggling to even enter a place called Dirty Muriel's, knowing the type that frequent these taverns. He double-checked outside. He said a prayer in advance and briefly allowed himself to hope she's hot. He was flustered. Right away, he pulled an Edgar. Like a bonehead, he followed up this smooth move by running off. One does not run ahead of a lady. Let us walk together, ma'am. She insisted on walking behind him. He was pretty sure he blew his chance. Sir, I like your hat. I have to admire you for it. Oh, I'm sorry. Just being honest. After successfully escorting her, I tried to get a second date. You have very pretty eyes, big lips, and unfortunately yellow skin, and you're considerably taller than me. But yeah, when you're done on the elf scaring, you know where to find me. I guessed the 2 slips of paper she handed me were filled with sweet nothings and contact info. Pepsican had to wake himself up from his dream. This lust was not virtuous. He was crushing on a tavern wench. Thought that would be Drissus. His pride slightly wounded, he made his way back to the Mages Guild. Jackson sought closure by pawning the items.
What may I do for you?
Can you tell me who your barber is? I'm looking a little, overdue. You got a good look going on. He feared this would be the time that Skink showed his true colors and asked him to do something devious. But the alternative was far worse. These mages and their books, my gosh. Well, let's hope he doesn't expect me to steal it. I may try a rare bookseller. Well, it sounds like a hint. You have 2 ears, so I'm gonna admire you twice. Oh, okay. Fair enough. He found himself at an impasse, with Siri divulging no information, and Skink's book unaffordable. He didn't know how to proceed. I didn't know how else to legally acquire money. You could say all my Kwama eggs were in the Mages Guild basket, but I couldn't do this to my bro. He had my back before. I was gonna get him this book. I knew just the way. If the Mages Guild needed this book so bad, they were gonna fund it.
Wow. He brings up a valid point.
After diligently reading them, I took and sold the books from the Mages Guild supply chest. This caused a great deal of distress, but he knew how much Skink wanted that book. With the addition of a much-needed scroll, I was able to fund the Forbidden Tome. I resisted the urge to immediately take it to the temple. I knew it was banned for a reason. I dared not read it. This was a huge moment, Skink. Skink, my man, let no shade be thrown upon me. Not today. Feeling flush, I gathered supplies from the local chapters. I was steadily rising through the ranks and had 1,000 gold to my name. I should have seen this decline coming. I was still level 1, and I had upheld my vow to not swing at anyone. I had also not successfully admired anyone either. After confessing that she knew of the bets going on, I only listened to Rhaenys long enough for her to tell me something even worse. If this prospective member was unwilling to join, I was to kill them. She was clearly being jocular. I laughed it off. I would peacefully find a way to convince this person to join, and track down this dues dodger. Life or death was at stake. I knew my personality sucked, so the first thing I did was buy new clothes. He didn't feel like a proper representative of the Mages Guild, wearing a commoner's threads. Given that I can't consult online resources, I actually don't know if this makes a difference in any way, but I didn't want to take any chances. I bought some pungent insect cologne. I opted to buy Mark and Recall instead of Calm Humanoid and Creature. I figured I would use those more often and it would help me save money. But anyways, I promised you a decline. I set out 4 different times to try and complete this quest. These were some of the most frustrating yet hilarious experiences I've ever had with this game. I'm going to show you the highlights. My first expedition out began with an ill omen. This man forcibly gave me a pamphlet. I felt compelled to read it. I found the behavior of both parties involved appalling. I brazenly chose to leave from Vivek, thinking I could manage the navigation myself.
You dumb bastard.
My awareness and defensive capabilities were definitely improving. This maiden trip didn't last long, though. He hadn't gone far before being chased into Saran, the scummiest town on this island. In line with their reputation, they offered no beds. At least nowhere he was willing to look. In this state, the trail out of town was just a path to an early grave. I almost paid for a trip back before remembering I have recall now. My first venture out had been discouraging, yet I confidently strode out of Balmora for another attempt. 2 feeble monsters did their best to inhibit my progress. Eventually, I had to concede when their buddy showed up. I veered heavily off course and wound up in Caldera. I hoped to find free quarter, but was left very disappointed by the local guild hall. He looked around town. Luckily, Schenk's shovel seemed like an honest traveler's inn. He paid the 10 gold fee for a bed. Wary of any intruders, he used his newly acquired lock spell to keep himself safe. A restful night's sleep later, and he realized his error. By not allowing myself any security skills, I had also locked myself in the room. I was down 10 gold and back in Vivek. By the way, I usually say Vivek, but it seems the characters in the game, and according to the lore, it's Vivek. I'm sure someone will have a problem with it either way. On second thought, I'm going to look at the sound files and put this to rest.
Yes, Incarnate. I am Vivek.
Let me try and clean that up.
I am Vivek, and I can answer all your questions.
You just did.
Anyways, my third trip out was a disaster. It was also amazing, though. In short,
It was friggin' awesome.
it was the 7th day of the week, so before I could set out, I had to spend an hour in temple. I hoped this would bring me good fortune. Shortly after leaving, I again had to uphold my virtue. I came across this disgusting thing, and a guar. It was oddly hard to interact with the man. They needed an escort into town. I, of course, agreed. It was resolved smoothly, and I was compensated. So I bought some cool gloves. On the road again, Pepsi Can was about to be shook up. This time he was headed in the right direction, but he had picked up 2 bogeys on his tail. Did his best to avoid panicking, and the Dunmer stronghold seemed the best route to relieve the anxiety. Unfortunately, this would have the opposite effect. For a reason I couldn't figure out at the time, the door would not let me in. I checked the map to ensure it was a real door. I instead dashed for the other one, and while experiencing the same issue, made it inside. The current residents were not thrilled to see me, and I briefly felt like I belonged in a cartoon. I struggled to evade them while I tried to come up with a plan. I consumed a lot of potions in this endeavor. At certain times I had found some nooks of safety, but they were soon compromised. I realized the tables had been turned, and a thought crossed my mind.
Trapped like a rat, aren't I?
There was clearly nothing to do but to leave.
I'm a rat! I'm trapped like a rat! I gotta get out of here! I'm trapped like a rat! Calm down, Charlie. Calm down.
In my actual frantic state, I completely forgot about the cliff racers outside. I've been editing out some of my menus because I take a while. I'm just gonna let this play out in real time.
Who are you? What's the password? I can't let you in without the password.
You can kind of see the gears turning in my head, and I realized the cliff racer model was blocking the entrance. This certainly won't be the last time it presents a problem for me. If I didn't put all my effort into survival here, it was pretty much safe scumming. I was very hesitant to use this potion. I dreaded that the game's invisibility mechanic may betray me. If the enraged racer was mid-attack, I feared it would break my spell. Luckily, this potion proved its worth and allowed me an easy escape. As should be expected, I picked up a few more not long after. I had encroached on their territory, and they were rightfully pecking me. It seemed like my resilience was rewarded, though. I had finally taken enough of a beating to earn a level up.
Hell, it's about time.
He wished not to squander this progress. There is nowhere to rest. He had been clear. There was to be no desecration of sacred shrines, hanging in bandit caves, or disturbing the tombs of the ancestors. I couldn't take anything from them anyways, so what was the point? In my desperation, I called upon ancestors long past to try and draw the aggression of the cliff racer. Its cries as I entered this tomb assured me it was not dead. He was in utter disbelief. Of all the tombs scattered across Morrowind, he had found the single one where he was actually welcome. Instantly relieved, formulated a plan, rested immediately after. I was proud to have gained my first level advancement. Hoped to invest my stat points wisely. After this recovery and meditation, I used the key to enter the tomb. I deliberated the best offering to make in exchange for my safe harbor. Rather than cloud up the spiritual energy with the soul of a beast, I left the customary 10 gold bed fee, plus 5 more for my intrusion. Jackson felt pride. Upon leaving the dank tomb, he relocked the door at exactly its previous locked value. He gathered the rest of his magicka and his resolve. After setting out once more, I questioned whether there was any hope of finding either destination, but carried on. The pursuit had left me far from civilization, deep into the Malagamer region. To hit these guys with Paralyze, you have to jump. Now, at an even further level of desperation, I retreated into a tent.
Can you ask your question quickly?
I was not greeted warmly. This led me into a bind. However, I found my magicka bars deceiving, and I was able to venture out again after I could afford to cast my efficient heal spell 3 times. This was all for naught, and the powers of Almsv brought me to Molag Mar. My adventure had only begun, though. Rest was imperative. He explored the town. First, he noted the slave market directly across from the shrine. Odd values for a temple. On the map, he noted a hostel. Had heard whispers of those who made a pilgrimage. This made sense. What didn't was the inability to rest there. Here, PCJ found himself on the wrong side of the law for the first time in Morrowind. With no one around to pay, I guessed I was supposed to think a temple hostel at a frequently journeyed to destination may offer beds free of charge. Like, all the math added up in my head.
No.
The law had a different opinion, and it was going to cost 4 gold. I had officially stained my record. If not for the fact that I haven't vomited in like 2 decades, I may have on the spot given these sickening actions. My wallet was lighter, my guilt was heavier, my health and spirits
We're low.
The temple had shown themselves untrustworthy. He looked through the residential areas. He breathed a sigh of relief and exasperation, finding a place called the Pilgrim's Rest. Certainly this is a place where a traveler could recover. Again, I found no one willing to rent me a bed. In frustration, I counted out a single coin till I had placed 10 on the bar. I went into the back where I had seen a spare room, closed the door, and took the liberty of a hard-earned night's rest.
But...
You gotta be kidding me. All right. Hello, Skink. Hello, Ajira. I'm going to f***ing sleep. Seemed I'd bitten off more than I could chew. Decided to look into some other jobs. I was headed to Telvos. Quickly realized I was too strapped for cash to afford a boat ride. I was gonna leg it up the coast. Never seen a swimming skeleton before. Considering they lack the muscles to move in the first place, won't question it. This was clearly not an option. He set out again, towards Mirandus. Though he'd walked these trails before, he had no idea they were leading him towards a life-altering experience. I was trying to strictly follow directions, and was grateful to be near the Imperial Fort. I was forced to retreat there quite often. They saved me numerous times. I was beginning to think that the Imperials had my best interest in mind more often than the natives did. I had acquired the mystical spell Righteousness during my travels. Facing countless attacks and frequent spell failure, my patience grew thin. It was when a single enemy threatened to end my trip prematurely, and I was only feet from the fort, that I tested the ability on an unlucky bug mutt. He knew not how much harm he would inflict upon the hound. He was shocked, and he fled back to the fort. It took him some time to recover from this trauma. He knew he had to go beyond the range of the helpful legionnaires. Shamefully, once again, peculiar paths and enduring enemies brought him to the city limits of his least favorite locale. I wish not to squabble with you, mud crab, for you may best me. Grass stains would wash out. The ones on his conscience wouldn't, not to mention the stains on the beds of Saran. I opted to take a short nap in the sunshine. I knew sleeping in the grass was wrong, but this breach of ethics paled in comparison to the events about to transpire. I was awakened by a loud noise. In my mind, I declared that this would be the final time. I felt newly empowered by righteousness. If his duty was killing others, killing him was, well, not virtuous, but at least justified. I called upon my ancestors, and we smote the stalker. Jackson found it hard to even look at the corpse. When he finally could, he took the man's helmet. He intended to lay this down at the feet of the man responsible for this travesty. He had been forced into a murder. Noticing the gloves of the assassin, he felt entitled to anything so stained with his own blood. Regardless of how he lived, I wished not to dishonor him in death. I laid his possessions out in a ceremonial fashion, said a brief prayer of respect, and then accidentally ate him. Reconsidering if anything would be stained with my blood, it would be the dagger, so I took that. His hatred for the town of Saran was overridden by his need to cleanse his spirit. It was Sunday, after all. Though lacking even a proper shrine in their temple, he spent an hour meditating to clear the sins swirling in his mind. He looked to offload these killers' tools and seeked an honest merchant. The Saran trade house appeared to fit the bill. He felt confident that this was the type of place that wouldn't remind him of his recent act, his time spent in prison, or the years of debauchery that led up to him.
What is this regarding, Breton?
Outlander. Make it quick.
Outlander?
That's it for now, guys. Let me know if you'd like to see more. If you enjoyed this video, thank you. I've been Z. Stay virtuous out there. I'll catch you guys later.